Well, hello everyone and welcome. I am so thrilled to be with you all today. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Amanda Walsh and I'm the founder of Astrology Hub. And today we have a very special guest. His name is Charles Eisenstein. Charles was featured on the Astrology Hub podcast last year, right around Earth Day. And it was one of our most popular episodes. And so I recently read an article by Charles called The Coronation, in which he gave his very beautiful, brilliant thoughts around what's happening for all of us right now. And what I noticed in his essay, of course, right, is the astrological themes that were discussed throughout. And so I thought, hey, I'll invite Charles back and we can have another conversation that is centered around the astrological invitation for all of us at this time, and get your thoughts, Charles, on how to best work with it, because there's always a choice. We always have a choice. We can express the higher expression of the invitation, or we can sort of digress into the more shadow elements of the transits and what's happening. So I would love to have this
Yeah.
discussion with you now, and we're so happy that you're here. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, that's cool. I didn't know my essay had astrological themes in it, but I'm glad that it did. I'm one of those people who knows nothing about astrology, but still believes in it, which
Yes.
is usually people who know nothing about it don't believe in it. But so I'm happy to learn about the astrological themes.
Well, I'm not surprised, because one of your focal points in the work that you do is the story of separation versus the story of interbeing.
Mm-hmm.
And astrology completely, I want to use the word proves, but that's a tricky word, but demonstrates our interconnectivity, our interbeing, our both with each other, with ourselves, and with the universe. So of course you would believe in it, but not really know much about it, because you actually don't need to know that much about it to know that that's true.
Yes.
All right, Charles. So some of the, astrologers have been talking about 2020 for years, if not decades, and seeing this big, tidal wave of energy that was heading our way. They could see it as a huge tidal wave of energy, and or you could say a choice point or a crossroads for humanity. And some of the main themes that they have been talking about for a very long time are things around existing structures and systems and the breakdown of that, the breakdown of the old in order for something new to emerge. There's been themes that they saw that would come up around Pluto, things like death and rebirth and purification, and like the underworld and shadow coming to light. And they warned about the danger of going into fear, which is very Saturnian, and that one of our biggest challenges would be around things like fear and boundaries. So let's talk about those things. Those are, up for everybody. And so I'd love to hear some of your thoughts around those themes, and then we can just see where we go.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of themes. It sure does look like familiar structures are breaking down. And part of me greets that with excitement, maybe even joy, because our society has been trapped in structures that do not serve the planet, that do not serve the people in the society, that don't even serve the elites, don't even serve the 1%. These are not happy, thriving people on any level of society. So, but we've all been kind of stuck in it, stuck not only just because of the dynamics of the institutions, their institutional interests, but also stuck because the world that we're familiar with seems like reality itself. It's hard even to imagine something else when we think that our constructs are real. For example, the constructs of money and debt and law and corporations and governments, all of these things are actually human agreements. They're constructs. Not that they necessarily are consciously invented by human beings, but they are the enrollment of archetypes and gods, of human beings in a co-creation. Anyway, not going to get too metaphysical, but just to say that so I've been like many people, kind of excited for it all to fall apart, and at the same time being afraid of it all falling apart. So this schizophrenic response to it also manifests on the social level. One response to things falling apart is to try desperately to bring them back together again, and to double down on whatever of the old normal we can resuscitate, and to faced with the unknown, faced with uncertainty, to impose more control. Some of the control you could easily justify as, well, it's to protect us from this scary virus. But a lot of the control is simply to reassure us that we are in control. They make us feel safer. They give us the illusion of control. Another way that people respond to uncertainty is to look for mommy and daddy to make things better. And so we have, at least initially, broad public acceptance of authoritarian measures. Now I'm starting to feel, and I don't know, maybe there's a good astrological take on this, but I'm starting to feel like people are becoming less enthusiastic about mommy, daddy, and big brother keeping them safe, and not really wanting to stay in their room anymore. I feel like there's a shift happening right now, where this other part of ourselves, which didn't want actually the old normal, and welcomes the new, and at least, like, our disaffection with the way things were, our feeling of confinement, is enough that we're not going to put up with too strenuous an effort to maintain it and restore it. Like, there's this rebel energy, this welcome of the new that coexists with the fear of the new. And it's a process whereby the one gradually gives way to the other. So that's kind of what I'm seeing, or at least part of what I'm seeing going on right now.
What's so brilliant about that is there's been several astrologers who basically summarized the invitation into like a distilled sentence, and that is to own our inner authority. That is the ultimate invitation of this year. And so what you're describing is people saying, okay, well, I put my trust in something outside of myself, mommy, daddy, as you say, but now I'm questioning that. And I'm wondering, is that actually where my trust should be? And if it's not there, then where else should it be? And so they're feeling this internal change, and it's scary to have that moment of realization of, wait, maybe I can't even trust mommy and daddy. Maybe they don't actually have my best interests in mind. And if they don't, then who else would? So I think what you're describing is that shift. And, here we are almost midway through the year. And that is truly one of the ultimate outcomes that could be a positive outcome of this.
Yeah, that's one reason why I called the essay The Coronation. Talking about inner authority. I mean, another word for that would be sovereignty.
Yes. So
a coronation is a ceremony of coming into sovereignty. And certainly one of those is, I'm going to think for myself. I'm not going to blindly accept what a superior authority is telling me. But I'll listen to that authority. And I'm also going to listen to those that authority has cast out. I'm going to make the choice about what information resonates with me and what doesn't. I'm going to use my own critical thinking and not be told what information is okay and what information is not. That's one aspect of authority, of sovereignty over my mind. And then another aspect of sovereignty, the second reason I called it the coronation, and this is very astrological too, is that unconscious choices are coming into consciousness. Things that we had just kind of blandly accepted as the way things are, that we had been unconsciously choosing, now they're being put in our face and we're being asked, is that really what we want? I have the image of being on this road, walking down this path and with our heads so fixed on the ground in front of us, just to avoid the potholes of daily life, and to get by, that we didn't even look up to see all of the exit ramps that could have taken us in a different direction. And now it's like society, and we've tripped, we've stumbled, and we get up and we raise our head and we see where this road is going. It's going to a world no one wants to live in. We see it because it's being shown to us in sharp relief, a totalitarian, germ-obsessed, hygienic hell. And we're like, do we actually want to go there? Look, there's a path in this direction too. It's toward, holistic and organic world. There's another path in this other direction toward the world of solidarity and mutual care. I mean, there's so many different ways that we could go. And for once, the way we had been going no longer seems inevitable anymore. That doesn't mean that we have been rescued from it by any means. In fact, the default is going to be to continue down the road that we've been going on. That's where the inertia will take us of our institutions. But at least we have a choice right now. And many people individually are faced with that choice too. Do I want to go back to the life, even if I can? Do I want to go back to that life? And how much effort do I want to put into, even if like you're divided? Yeah, I don't want to go back, but I have to pay my mortgage. I'm scared not to. If it takes a lot of effort to go back and you kind of don't want to, even if you think you should, you're not going to do it, because the soul's rebellion called procrastination and laziness is going to bless you with getting in your own way to reestablish normal.
Yeah. Well, it's this idea around inner authority and sovereignty, boundaries, values. You're bringing up this question of, what do we actually value? What is worth preserving? One of the ideal outcomes of this death and rebirth would be that it becomes crystal clear what is worth valuing, and we thread that through into the next version of whatever this looks like, and we let go of the things that weren't serving. So mm-hmm. I've heard you talk a lot about looking at our values and reevaluating what actually is important. What does it mean to be human? One of the themes of our 2020 forecast event, where this was prior to this whole storyline unfolding, but the astrologers were talking about the themes of 2020 and what would be really important to keep in mind. One of the biggest things was this idea of staying human. And so I think at this point, it's, what does that actually mean? What does it actually mean to be human? And what does it mean to stay human? And how do we do that?
Mm-hmm. Wow. There's a lot of different directions I could go with that. On one just really visceral level, we're being asked to live in a way that is not human. To like cover your face. I mean, this is primal. Ever since human beings have been on this planet, we have communicated, even before we had language. The way we understand each other and commune with each other is through facial expressions. Those are prior even to language. I mean, it is a profound abrogation of our humanity to cover our faces so that we cannot communicate through our smiles and through our expressions. So that's like one way of not being human. Not socializing, not being together. That's also inhuman. To mediate all of our communication through an electronic device, that is kind of inhuman. And then also to devote our lives to safety is actually to relinquish life itself. Because the purpose of life is not to survive. It's not to make it to your death intact. Like, you cannot live fully if you are cut off from life. And that includes the literal cutoff from the microbial world. This vision of health that depends on absolute hygiene, the obsessive cleaning of all surfaces, the isolation from each other, no contact, that's not human either. And it prevents us from engaging key aspects of life. And actually, in the end, it actually makes us less healthy too, because health does not come in isolation. Health comes through relationship, through the flow of the world through us, socially and biologically too. So even on its own terms, the obsession with safety doesn't actually bring us safety, and I mean, it doesn't bring us immortality for sure. So if you could, like, I could see if you could be immortal by locking yourself in an aseptic isolation bubble. If you could live forever, if you could prevent death and be immortal that way, I could see how some people might choose that. But if you know you're going to die anyway, is that the kind of life you want to live? So yeah, like, I don't want to take absurd risks, because I do value living a full, long life, but I don't value it above everything else. Nor should anybody, nor does anybody actually. People engage in risky behavior all the time. And so now it's like we've temporarily, I hope, agreed that risk is bad and that we should live lives in lockdown and isolation to reduce our risk. I could see if it were the bubonic plague that was killing 90% of the people, in some villages it did, and 50% nationally, I could see, yeah, let's stay away from each other until the plague passes. And initially, we were kind of told that it was maybe not that bad, but 3.4% was what the WHO was saying. And if you disagreed with it, you were unscientific. Now it turns out that it's probably closer to 0.1, 0.2%. Yet the habits and requirements of lockdown. I mean, in Rhode Island, where I'm living now, for a while they were telling us anytime you were outdoors, you had to wear a mask. Now it's just, in public places, you're allowed to go jogging now without a mask on. You can't go in the ocean. It's kind of like the dream come true for the vice principal of my high school, where who believed that authority and control are fundamental goods. And if you're in those positions, it does seem that way, because this is this is part of a deep civilizational ideology that that progress means progress in controlling the world outside of ourselves. One thing I appreciate about astrology is it validates, it affirms that the world and our lives have an order and an intelligence beyond our own creation of it. And that our efforts to control our lives encounter a limit. It's not random. Our lives are not random, nor are they explainable through mechanical causal analysis. So it's an invitation into humility and into various forms of listening.
One of the things you just brought up that one of our astrologers that I have on weekly was just describing to us is that the word cosmos means both order and beauty. It's a Greek word that means both order and beauty. And so there's order in that cosmos, but there's also that, I love that you use the word beauty in the title of your book that I'm reading right now, The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible, and that you chose the word beautiful. You didn't choose the word safe. You didn't choose the word progressive. You didn't choose the word perfect.
Or even better. Yeah.
Or better.
Yeah.
Exactly. You chose beautiful. And it is one of those things, again, an invitation of 2020 is to own that inner authority to co-create with the universe. Yes, these transits that we're in, they were written in the stars from the beginning of time. And yet we still have a choice in how we respond to the energy at all times, whether it's a personal transit, a collective transit, both. We are choosing, we're co-creating with the universe. And so what you're bringing up is this, again, this choice point. And we're choosing right now, we're choosing a path that is more and more restrictive, more and more control. And I think probably in defense of most people, the idea is that it's temporary. And so, yes, we'll do this temporarily. But if I was faced with the choice of doing this forever, I don't know if it would be so clear. There's a quote, Charles, from your book, and I love it because it is really revealing about why it's hard for us to believe that there could be a more beautiful world on the other side of this. And I know myself, I've grappled with those moments of like, oh my God, it's like we're on this steam train in this direction that God, I don't want to live in that world. Like, no. I mean, I remember the first time hearing the term social distancing and being like, oh, what? Like, that's a term, social distancing? And then having a complete breakdown when I was forced to wear the mask in a store because I love to smile and I love to smile at people. It's a way that what you were talking about. It's a way that I acknowledge. And so to have that just masked, it was like, whoa. But one of the things you say in your book is it is an exquisitely vulnerable position to believe, to trust in purpose, in guidance, and that I will be okay. And you use this word exquisite, these words exquisitely vulnerable, because while some people put that in like, oh, well, you're just Pollyanna and naive and that's wishful thinking, it's actually a very courageous stance to take.
Yeah. All the more courageous when it gets ridiculed as Pollyanna-ish, and silly and naive. And it's not that, trust and you'll be okay.
Right.
It's more, even if you're not okay, you'll be okay. That it's trust that there is an intelligence behind things. And trust what? Really, it comes down to trust what? It's the invitation is to trust something besides the mind's narration of reality to you and the mind's predictions and fears and cost benefit analyses. To trust something else, you have to accept that there is something else to trust, that there is some other source of intelligence. It could either be, spirits, or it could be the body itself. But unless you believe that there is wisdom outside of the mind's constructions, then it is stupid to trust anything else. I mean, a practice that I've been working on, like the reason I talk about this is because I do it, like I'm so much in the mind and always trying to find a reason why it's okay to do what I actually want to do. And then getting lost in the reasons and not even being in touch with what I really want to do. The knowledge of what I really want to do comes from other organs, the gut, the heart. Those impulses need to be interpreted by the brain, but the brain can't do it on its own. Can't just make up, cannot guide us reliably. I want to talk a little bit about what you were saying about the social distancing too. Mm-hmm. And this also comes from a gut level reaction. Like I felt the same way you did. I felt appalled. I felt indignant this can't be right. So then my mind goes looking for the reasons why it's not right. I'm totally biased. It's not like I impartially surveyed all of the evidence. On the one hand, why distancing, masks, and lockdowns are good. And we could extend it to mandatory vaccinations, mandatory microchipping, mandatory phone apps to contact trace you, et cetera, snitch lines to report on your neighbors if they're gardening without a mask, like the whole shebang, right? Like, it's not like I impartially surveyed the evidence why we should do that and the other evidence why masks are not helpful, why lockdown is not helpful, why vaccines are not safe, why the totalitarian implications of microchipping everybody, et cetera, right? It's not like I impartially surveyed all of the evidence and then from my mind decided that I would be appalled and indignant. It was a gut reaction. That doesn't mean that it's right. I mean, that doesn't mean that I'm right. I can't lord it over somebody else and say, well, my gut says that this is wrong. That's an attempt to use the mind to bully somebody else's gut. So that would not be valid. But I guess I'm just being honest but I resonate with you, like it was like my nightmare come true. In fact, in The Ascent of Humanity, which was my first ambitious book, I wrote it in 2003 through 2006. I talked about like the regime of control, the war on germs, and I drew this nightmare scenario where you never go out in public unless you're wearing like the life suit. I put a fake TM by it. Like basically, I was like predicting this, but I didn't really believe that it would get that bad. But I was like, if we keep going in this direction, this is where the story of separation takes us. If you, because that's what the book is about. It's about the story of separation, which is the idea that who you are is this bounded, separate individual. And if you believe that, then your integrity, your health, your wholeness becomes simply a matter of enforcing your boundaries, of keeping everything else out, of dominating the other, dominating the world. And the better you're able to do that, the better off you'll be. The more you can insulate yourself from the others, from other people, from germs, because life is a war of each against all. If we are truly separate individuals, then your well-being doesn't depend on my well-being. In fact, probably if I suffer misfortune, you'll be better off because we're in competition with each other. Mm. That's the ideology. So if you accept that ideology, and if we as a society accept that ideology, all of this is inevitable. You don't need to have a group of evil conspirators executing their totalitarian plan to explain why this is happening. It is the natural outgrowth of a mythology, the mythology of separation. And there's probably some astrological thing to say about this too, but what I have been working toward and predicting is a transition, a metamorphosis, where this mythology is getting infirm. And I used to think that we were going to be kind of saved by collapse. That it was inevitable that this mythology and the world built on top of it, the world of separation, domination, and control would disintegrate, and we would be birthed into a new world. Now I'm a bit more thinking along the lines of the breakdown gives us a choice, but it doesn't save us. And we could enter yet a new iteration of the world of separation in even more extreme form, which will then erupt into another crisis breakdown choice. And we can choose again and again and again. And if we keep choosing separation, we keep doubling down on the world of control, there is a mythological indicator of where we would go. It's like the grays, the singularity, the human becoming machine. Um, there are science fiction and kind of the vernacular mythology of various, I don't know, we can kind of see where we would go. And there's nothing that is going to rescue us from our choices. Like, we could choose that. So in a way, when I speak of, I got to be careful, when I speak of an age of reunion that is coming and a more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, this future that beckons us, I am saying that it is real, but it's also, I use the word possible, because for it to be real, we have to claim it. And for us to claim it, we have to know that it's real. If you think it's a fantasy, then you won't be able to claim it. So essentially what I'm trying to do is to wield prophetic speech, which is to speak something into reality. But even so, prophecy does not mean, it's not inevitability. Prophecy is not predicting the future. Prophecy is opening a path to a future, which then must be walked.
That is absolutely confirmed by the astrology as well.
That's a relief.
Yes, there is no, I mean, there is no inevitable outcome of any astrological transit. It opens up possibilities. There's always a choice. And what you've described about where we're at collectively, I love how you say before you thought of it as collapse would save us. But now you're seeing that it's that collapse gives us this pause, this opening to pull our heads up from that path we were on, look around us, go, is this really where we want to be? And make that choice. And so, and I think anybody who's been through a personal crisis, I know you've been through a divorce, I've been through a divorce. I remember many times, and it wasn't just a divorce for me, it was a complete financial breakdown, everything breakdown. And I remember having these moments of, okay, I can choose the outcome where I end up more bitter, prematurely aged, just angry, and an enemy with my former spouse. Or I could choose a totally different outcome. That's hard for me to see because you don't see it around in our culture a lot. But maybe this could be harmonious. Maybe I could end up better for it. Maybe the kids don't have to be traumatized. Maybe there is a different kind of outcome. And so this to me that was like the little microcosm in my little existence, but we're being asked to make those kinds of maybe, what if choices right now. And those are really hard. It's actually easier to spiral into the inevitable story that our culture weaves, that we believe, that we've seen happen over and over again. It's easier to just go in there, but I think the results are much more devastating. The other one requires the building of this momentum that has to come from within, and it has to come from a place of choice. It's like, okay, I'm choosing this and I'm going to do the work. I mean, Pluto, Saturn, Capricorn, these are heavy hitters. This is not, oh, we're just going to, weave into the next reality and float in there and it's going to be great. It's like, no, we are going to have to work. We are going to have to be disciplined. We are going to have to be committed. We are going to have to look at things we don't want to look at. And we're going to have to make really tough choices at times. And again, it's like, that's the script of the astrology and that's the invitation. And that's where we're at.
Yeah, I really resonate with that. It's interesting, it does, just when you were talking about we have a choice, that's an example of prophetic speech. To say that you have a choice actually gives someone a choice, because you might not have been aware that you had a choice. Just as we were not aware as a society that we really had any choice but to continue down the road of more and more technology, more and more government surveillance of our lives, et cetera, et cetera. More and more social distancing is not new. Life has become more and more separate. more and more private, more and more digitally mediated over the last 30 years. And it didn't seem like we had a choice.
Mm.
The Internet of Things, people were just saying, this is what is going to happen. All of your devices will be spying on you all the time. This is just inevitable. And now we can say, actually, we don't have to have that future. We could choose a different future. And by saying that, and by saying, here's what the choice is, we actually make that choice available. And I agree with you, it's going to take a very intense effort of collective will to change the direction of society. If we just sit back and think, well, the planets have aligned and they're going to change everything, then nothing will change. We're called into our sovereignty right now. And what is it? But I want to even go a little bit more into, what do I mean by, what do you mean by it's not going to be easy? I think really what would be a more accurate way to put it is that it's going to require sacrifice. And sacrifice in the sense of giving up something that had been precious to us. But maybe that precious thing we're discovering isn't so precious. Like easy and cheap jet travel. Not sure how precious that is. Eating at restaurants all the time. One of the good things that's come of this is people are cooking a lot more. Maybe we don't want to go back to normal in many ways. And I guess then it comes down to, what is the attachment to some of these things that are being revealed as not precious or no longer precious? Yeah, I'm just looking at that myself, and I'm relieved not to be traveling anymore. It's a lot easier to do it this way for me than to get on an airplane and be away from my family. And this is a whole thing. When the lockdown ends, this is not an inevitability either. That's something we do also have to claim, and because and maybe struggle for, because the authorities, bless their hearts, they like lockdown. Maybe not as individuals, but there's like the authoritarian mind likes to use their powers. Any if you have a hammer, you like to hit the nails. You're good at that, and you tend to see the world as being full of nails to hit. And imagine if you're walking around with a hammer and you haven't been seeing any nails for a while, and you've been hitting screws and you've been hitting brackets and just not working, and finally you see a whole bunch of nails lined up. Then you're going to start pounding those nails, and you're going to want to keep doing that. That's kind of just putting myself in the shoes of the oversoul of the authoritarian state. I've been getting pretty frustrated because none of the problems of society have been amenable to my hammer, to my methods of control. We have been living in actually a growing pandemic of autoimmunity, depression, and addiction for the last 30 or 40 years. And there's nothing to control. Like, you can't quarantine people to protect them from autoimmunity or depression. You can't lock up a criminal to protect them from suicide. You can't bomb a terrorist and protect people from domestic abuse. Like these technologies of control don't work. And now finally, here comes something that is amenable to technologies of control. And if you're in authority, you feel powerful, you feel useful, you're validated. That's not easy to give up. So I don't think that we can assume that lockdown is going to end all by itself. If we just sit back and assume that, it will not end.
Mm.
But we do, yeah, we have to choose that also. So anyway, when it does end, that was my preamble to when it does end, when we do choose to end it, let's say, I'm going to be faced with invitations to go travel again. And then it becomes a matter of active choice.
One word you brought up that is a really interesting word is the word sacrifice. And that we may have to sacrifice things that are quote unquote precious. And the word sacrifice means to make sacred. And so, what might we need to give up that we have deemed precious in order to make what actually is sacred, sacred? And I think what's becoming clear through this process is what is actually sacred. And you have children, and so do I. And one of the things that I've noticed is how hard this has been on the children. All the adults are kind of running around like, chicken with our heads cut off, not knowing what to do and blah, blah. And yet here are these kids who went from, being immersed in their social reality with their friends at their schools, and maybe even the way they were doing school doesn't totally work. It's one of the reasons why I chose to send my kids to the Waldorf school, because for me, it's like a better version of that possibility. But how can we make what is actually sacred while identifying the things that we have deemed precious that maybe aren't so precious? I just think that's a really interesting inquiry. And then the other thing that you're bringing up here is these ideas around, the travel, and is that actually precious? And I live on Maui, and we are normally all around the year completely inundated with tourists, right? I mean, it's a tourist economy. And it has been so surreal to experience being here. It's almost like probably rewinding the clock 20, 30 years to experience what Maui was like before travel was cheap and there were hotels everywhere and people could come here. And so then, but it brings up this question, because some people are like, I don't want to open up Maui again. I want to keep it closed. But then it's like, well, but if we do that here, you realize the implications everywhere. Like, are you also okay with not being able to go other places? And if we're telling people they can't come here, then, none of this is simple, really. They're complicated questions. And again, I think for us now, one of the astrologers that I'm with on a weekly basis has equated the time period we're into the caterpillar being in the cocoon, but being goo still. Like, we're still goo right now, and one of the invitations is for our imaginal cells to be activating. Like, let's activate those imaginal cells so we can actually become the butterfly. But as we're goo, it's not, I don't know that being dedicated to having answers is the right commitment, but being dedicated to exploring possibilities seems to me to be a better use of our time in goo, because I don't think we're going to have the answers right this second.
Right. I agree. I think that when we're in the goo stage, it's mostly a matter of unlearning things that we thought we knew, deprogramming from old habits, and being open and exploratory, trying on new ideas without needing to attach so quickly to them. What happens when an old story breaks down is that people often try to leap to some new way to make meaning and sense of the world. Okay, it wasn't as I was told, so it must be this. Here's what it is. Like this craving for a replacement for the old certainty. That's one reason that people join cults. Cults look for people who are in a state of breakdown of their story. And conspiracy theories are kind of the same. It's like the old story of progress, and our institutions might be flawed, but still they're basically serving our interests, and like that story breaks down. And then you have a replacement, which is an evil cabal of conspirators is pulling the strings, and like that explains everything. You can explain everything. It's a totalizing discourse. That quick a leap is suspect for me. I think we need to spend more time in the goo, in the unknowing. And when we spent enough time there, because a lot of times the go-to news story is actually a version of the old story in disguise. It's not that different. The story of the world controlling cabal is not actually that different from the standard history of the world. It doesn't give. I don't want to go too much into that, but yeah, I just want to resonate with what you're saying. To actually hold this in between time as special. And that doesn't mean not to do anything. It's important. Part of what we need to do at this time is to take in all of the data points and let them work us, especially the data points that our familiar stories, our familiar mythology keeps out. So this does include the data points that the so-called conspiracy theorists are bringing up. It includes the data points that holistic medicine makes available to us that are being diligently kept out right now by the health authorities. Like, you can get booted off of YouTube for claiming that, vitamin C can prevent COVID or something like that. Even if it's true, it's just not allowed in the official narrative. So to bring all of those things in. And I think one thing that needs to be brought in is the I mean, I could take it way beyond COVID, but the effect of lockdown on the third world, on people who are economically precarious. Now there are tens of millions of people facing starvation. In this country alone, there are millions of children going to bed hungry on any given day. Globally, it's not just going to bed hungry. It's, your kid is wasting away. I mean, you're a parent. You can imagine what that would be like to have no food and your children are crying with hunger. Tens of millions of people are experiencing that. And that's one of the data points that the arithmetic of lockdown versus opening just doesn't, which will cause fewer deaths. Like, those people are getting, the people who ordinarily get left out of the equation are still getting left out of the equation. And so, I'm not, so I just wanted to say that just like, this isn't about, us in our little privileged cocoon being willing to be goo when we should be taking action. Like, we cannot take accurate action if we don't have all of the data points available to us. If we're operating on a partial data set, which has been conditioned and delimited in order to bring about the responses that actually serve existing powers, then we're not going to actually be able to help anybody. We're going to be unwitting agents of the machine. And that's why it is essential from a very practical, compassionate perspective to bring in all of the excluded information.
It is also, it's something that we talked about specifically for this month, that being extraordinarily important to question, why do I believe what I believe on either side of the spectrum, and to cultivate a genuine curiosity for understanding other perspectives and being willing to do, again, it's a harder path to choose, to say, well, why do you believe that? Why do you think what you think? And can I understand at least why you think what you think? There's someone close to me who has a very different perspective of what's happening. And I came to realize that we have one data point that is making the way that we view this vastly different. Her data point is that this has a 20% mortality rate. My data point is that this has a, like, closer to what you were saying, 0.003% or 0.01, or, and so, but then I put myself in her shoes. If this actually had a 20% mortality rate, could I maybe see it the way she sees it? And I was like, I would probably be seeing this very differently. But we differ on that point. So where are we getting our data from? What data is trustworthy? And then it opens up a different dialogue versus I'm right, you're wrong. The things I want to do to protect my children are better than the things you want to do to protect your children. It's like, that is not helping anybody, because at the end of the day, I think we all want the same things. We want to be able to live. We want to be able to thrive. We want to be able to feed our children. We want to have choices about our future. All these things. And so, but it's hard to do that. It's hard to do that. And it requires a humility that I think would serve us if we're focused more on how do we create something beautiful out of this. I personally think it's required for us to step out of the things that we're comfortable with and attached from an ego perspective, and say, okay, well, maybe I could see this a different way. And if so, what is that different way?
Yeah. And that includes, for me, it includes really kind of going into the mainstream people, mainstream virologists and frontline doctors, and really listening to their experience too. Because I don't want to ideologically keep that stuff out.
Right.
Just because I have this gut reaction to lockdowns and masks and tracking and all that. Like, what if I'm wrong? What are these people seeing? Why do they respond differently? I don't want to just caricaturize them and saying, well, they're, control freaks and authoritarian sheep, I want to understand for real what their view is. And so I've learned actually a lot about and come to deeply appreciate virology. The world that it's uncovered is fascinating. And it brings me data points that don't fit into a lot of the narratives that I'm constitutionally attracted to. Like it, I cannot explain this illness solely through the lens of 5G or glyphosate, or vaccines, or there's none of the narratives that I've encountered actually can cover everything.
Well, one of the things you talk about, though, is this desire to be safe, and to protect ourselves from all risk. And I think, again, partially it's having enough information and enough data to understand which risk is worth taking, and to be able to really measure that. And I think that's part of what's hard for people right now is we don't know what we can trust. We don't know who we can trust. We don't know what numbers we can trust. And so again, I agree with what you're saying. It doesn't mean don't do anything. I think right now the active inquiry is the thing to do, and to really gather the data and to trust what's in your heart. I have someone very, very close to me who is feeling very compelled to stand up and start a movement for something that he truly believes in. And I keep asking, is that coming from your heart? Is that what you feel you need to be doing at this time? And he keeps saying, yes, I do. And there's so much energy behind it. And one astrological word is the word desire. Desidere. It means of the stars. And so if you're having this pure desire, it's like maybe that is the role you're meant to play. Maybe that role is going to catalyze certain things that need to happen. And who knows what your soul's path is throughout this. So, coming back to that inner authority. I mean, really coming back to that inner authority. I can't tell anybody what is the right thing to be doing at this time. It's truly, what is it that's in your heart that is compelling you, that is pulling you? And can you find that? And that requires sometimes taking in a lot of information and then distilling it and being like, this is what's true for me. And I'm open to that truth changing. Like that actually could change.
Right. And it has been changing. It's really hard to know what the risks are. David Katz, he's a medical doctor, and he was on Rich Roll's podcast. Really worth watching, actually. He's a Yale epidemiologist or something. He's very mainstream, but he's against lockdown. And but I think it was him who made the point that if we were seeing like lurid reports every day of people dying in car accidents, and that was just like a drumbeat on the news, we would probably change our behavior and start to, clamor for
Bikes.
measures to be taken,
Right.
to make the road safer.
Right.
If we were shown daily footage of, abused children, like that would become a huge issue. But what we're being shown is daily footage of, daily reports of people who are suffering a horrible disease, COVID-19. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and our innate information processing capacities, they're like, wow, this is really serious, because it's what we're being shown. And that is fine if the media are not trying to manipulate us, but are sincerely and impartially serving our best interest, and showing us the things that we should be paying attention to. But that is a questionable assumption, or let's say that it needs to be questioned. Maybe it's true. Earlier on when I wrote the essay, that was when we were being told the fatality rate was 3.4%, which is really significant. I mean, that could have meant, tens of millions, hundreds of millions even of deaths globally. Now it's looking like it will never even reach 1 million. But at the time, the information that most people were aware of was very different and very hard to question. Like I was like, I don't want to accept this, but that's what it seems to be. So I was like, yeah, I guess we really do need to flatten the curve. That was the original justification for all this, and that changed. Now it's to prevent the curve from coming back again, which means it's
Which could
permanent.
go on forever and ever.
Right. Which means, to return to our earlier thing, that if we want to go back to normal, by which I mean certain desirable aspects of normal, such as you can go to a yoga class or a festival or a party or a school or a church again, then we're going to have to claim that, because the justification will never go away. What if immunity is temporary? What if there's a new virus? What if it's mutating? There's always a reason to, it's like after 9/11, a state of emergency was declared and renewed every year till now. It never ended. We're still in a state of emergency. Because when is terrorism ever going to go away? When are viruses ever going to go away?
Never.
Never.
No. And we actually need them. So, right. Yeah.
But is
It's
that our future, to become safer and safer and safer?
right.
Is that the holy grail of civilization, to someday reach in a state of complete security?
Not for me.
Not
I
for
don't, I
me.
can't answer for anybody else. But yeah, Charles, let's just wrap up with one very simple and not simple question. If you could have it all your way, if you could have it all your way, you wrote this book, The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. What does that more beautiful world look like?
Yeah, I get asked this a lot. Um, if I try to paint a picture of it, it sounds a bit like a cliche, ecological healing, um, uh, beauty in the built environment. Um, I think, see, the problem is that any description I give of it falls so far short of the actual vision that I can't even bring fully into my mind's eye. It's more of like a glow on the horizon that penetrates the present in the form of certain peak experiences and uh, these little snatches of beauty that are reaching out from the future. Little stories I hear, acts of generosity and kindness and courage that I witness, that make me think a world could be built on this. Technologies of reunion, as I call them, of healing soil, of healing human bodies, of social healing, of social regeneration, of restorative justice, things like that, of the healing of trauma. So I can't, like, when I come across these, I recognize them as being from this world. But it's really hard for me to put them all together and to paint a picture of it, And I don't think I need to do that. I think that it's enough for us to know that it exists and to accept its guidance and to bow into its service. Because when we bow into its service, then this being, which is a future, not the future, but a future, it grants us opportunities to express our desire to serve it. And we become attuned to recognizing those opportunities. And the communication, because this is an offering of the heart. So the communication of this future comes through the heart in the form of what we start caring about. And then we can be oriented and guided by our care, by what makes us feel alive. So that's, for me, that's more how I hold it than to try to paint the picture of it.
Once again, confirmed by the astrology, because if you think about the fact that each one of us has a very unique astrological chart and blueprint, a very unique soul purpose in this lifetime, and that each one of us has gifts to offer to that picture. So, of course, not one human being would hold the whole puzzle together. It's each person contributing what it is that they're here to contribute. And I love what you're saying in terms of bowing and being in service to the possibility of it and to the beauty of it. And then being open to the role that we're each meant to play in bringing about its existence.
Right. To like say, okay, here's what it's going to look like, and here's the
Yeah.
plan to get there. Like, what actually has to happen for us to get there is unfathomably mysterious and complex.
Yes.
There's no way you could hold it in a plan. Any plan is actually going to be a diversion. It's going to be a reduction of it. We have to trust a coordinating power way beyond ourselves that knows exactly where to deploy each one of us according to what you're saying, according to our unique permutation of gifts and circumstances. And then that's why I say the heart knows it's possible. The mind cannot fathom how to get there. We can't see the path. We can catch that glow on the horizon and maybe see a step or two down a path that I think that's the right path, but it disappears into the mist. So how do I know if I can't map it out?
Ah, Charles, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing in this dialogue and contributing your perspective. I am so grateful to have this opportunity to share your voice and your deep thoughts. I mean, the way that and not just deep thoughts, your deep heart. So thank you very much for being willing to be here with us once again.
Yeah, well, thank you, Amanda. I enjoyed it just like last time.
Awesome. Awesome, Charles. All right. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. Thank you for being a part of this dialogue. It's so brilliant for me to be able to have this conversation with the astrology in mind, because the astrology, again, we're guided, we're given those clues along that path, but each one of us has to step up and meet it. Um, and that's where the co-creation happens. So thanks to all of you for continuing to show up. If you would like to receive an alert, a summary each week of all the different special edition episodes that we're doing, you can go to astrologyhub.com/podcast and enter in to get the weekly digest, where I say, okay, these are the interviews that we did. Here are the topics that we explored. And then you can see it all in one easy place. That's astrologyhub.com/podcast. I highly recommend getting a copy of Charles' book, The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. I'm currently listening to the audio version of it, Charles, and just loving it. Again, I think it's great goo material. As we're in goo, it's great material to be just kind of marinating in and really contemplating. And Charles, is there anywhere else they can go to learn more about your work?
My website,
CharlesEisenstein.com.
dot something.
CharlesEisenstein.something.
Yeah.
All right, you can Google it. Or what am I using now? DuckDuckGo.
DuckDuckGo, yeah.
Yeah, because
CharlesEisenstein.org, I think is
.org.
I think the other ones go to it there too. So yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. I just recently did the DuckDuckGo thing because of all the tracking on Google. I mean, who knows? We're on Facebook right now.
Yeah. Nothing's monolithic. We got to
Yeah.
use what is available to us.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. Well, thank you so much again, and I can't wait to connect with you all very soon. Take care, everybody. Aloha.